Prepare ye for Leon Draisaitl and the Edmonton Oilers.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Tuesday, January 7th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins your first listen every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and it's available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $200 in bonus bets. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And before we get started looking at tonight's Oilers-Bruins game, as well as updating the Eastern Conference Power Rankings, a quick reminder that you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. You can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan, and part of that arose from the Bruins playing the Oilers in the 1990 Stanley Cup Final. My sister was a huge Oilers fan at the time, so as a good little brother, I really dug into my Bruins fandom that year, especially, and the rest is history. I've been covering this team for various outlets for 20 years now. I was a full-time hockey news writer for The Score up here in Toronto, and I have been hosting this podcast since 2019. And in that time, the Boston Bruins have been one of the better teams in the NHL. Some ups and downs, but for the most part, it's been pretty up for the Bruins in that time. This year, not so much. It's a bit of a downturn for this team. They're still in playoff contention, still in a playoff spot, as we'll see later on in the power rankings. But 2025 is not off to a great start, as they have lost 5 of their past 6 coming out of the holiday break. Going into the break, things looked pretty good. They were coming off a win over Buffalo. They had defeated the Washington Capitals in pretty convincing fashion right in front of the break. But since then, they've lost to Columbus, but then beat Columbus, but then losses to Washington, the Rangers, the Leafs, and the New York Islanders most recently on Sunday. And things are not going to get any easier as they welcome the Edmonton Oilers to town tonight. It's the second of 2 meetings between these two teams. The Bruins lost to Edmonton a few weeks ago out in Alberta as part of that long Western road trip that started off disastrously, and they were able to kind of redeem themselves a little bit. But, of course, they did lose to the Oilers, and this is a team that advanced to the Stanley Cup Final last year. They pushed back from a 3-0 series deficit against the Florida Panthers to force a 7th game. They, of course, did lose, but they are as good as ever. And lest you think that it's Connor McDavid that you have to be most worried about, well, it's Leon Draisaitl right now, who leads this team with 59 points, and he leads the NHL with 29 goals. The Bruins are allowing 3.12 goals per game. Would not be a surprise to see Draisaitl himself post 3 goals against the Bruins tonight. Now, let's start with their goaltending. It hasn't been especially strong this season. Both Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard come in with tandem .898 save percentages. It's better than both Jeremy Swayman and Joonas Korpisalo, both of whom are in the low 890s. Right now, Swayman's at 891. Korpisalo is 892. Korpisalo played in the game against the Islanders, so I would expect Swayman to be getting the start tonight. He's 13-3-3 with that 89.1 save percentage. The Oilers have won 3 in a row beating Utah, Anaheim, and Seattle. They're 7-2-1 over their past 10 games overall. And of course, you still have to keep an eye on Connor McDavid, who's got 54 points. Both of these guys well above Boston's leading scorer, who is David Pastrnak at the moment. Pastrnak is 17 points back of Draisaitl, 12 points back of McDavid. He does have 17 goals now after that outburst over the weekend where he scored 4 goals in 2 games. But he's still only on pace for, 34 goals, which is well below what we expect from him. In fact, it's tied with Jake DeBrusk, who scored his 17th last night for the Vancouver Canucks, just as a point of comparison. The Oilers rank 11th on the power play and have a 23.5% success rate there, which is a bit low for them, really, considering all the firepower they have in their lineup. Zach Hyman off to a bit of a slower start this season. They do have an amazing blue liner in Evan Bouchard back there to quarterback the power play. He's got no power play goals this season. Matthias Ekholm with 3 for them. Draisaitl, McDavid, Zach Hyman, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, the other power play goal-scoring leaders for this team. Their penalty kill is kind of average, 24th, 76.9%, although it's better than the Bruins, who are at 76.2%, and Boston's power play prowess still sits 31st in the NHL. The Oilers are playing very good offensively. They've got 3.28 goals per game. The Bruins, again, allowing 3.12. The Oilers defensively, despite their goalie save percentages, they're pretty good. A top 10 team in terms of goals allowed per game, 2.79. The Bruins are allowing, again, 3.12. So on paper, this looks like a real tough matchup for the Boston Bruins. Again, they did compete pretty well in the game in Edmonton. In fact, this one went to overtime. The Bruins did get a point. They were up 2-0 in this one, thanks to early goals from Elias Lindholm and Mark Kastelic. But they allowed the Oilers to score in the second period, late in the third period, and then they escaped with the extra point. So if the Bruins can bring a similar effort, they outshot Edmonton 11-5 in the first period of that one, got out to a 2-0 lead. It was probably one of their better periods of the season. They need to replicate that in order to have any chance of success here against the Oilers, even on home ice. And again, after this one, it does not get any easier for the Bruins as they will play both Florida teams in their next 3 games. They go to Florida after tonight to take on the Lightning on Thursday, the Panthers on Saturday, come home to host the Lightning next week in a 2-game week where they will be off Wednesday, Thursday, Friday before hosting or visiting the Ottawa Senators on January 18th. So points could be a bit tough, and the Bruins and Senators are really neck and neck right now in the Eastern Conference playoff race. And coming up as the podcast continues, we are going to update the Eastern Conference power rankings and assess where the Bruins sit among some bubble teams here in the Eastern Conference. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. You can even get in on the action with respect to the NHL. Tonight's over-under for the Bruins-Oilers game is set at 5.5. So put $5 down on that, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with that $200 bonus thanks to FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. It's free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today we are updating the Eastern Conference Power Rankings, where the Boston Bruins are decidedly middle of the pack here. Now, it's kind of deceiving. Again, I've say this all the time, that it's important not to just look at the point total. Right now, the Bruins look like one of the better teams in the East, especially in the Atlantic Division, where they sit third in total points. They're 9 points back of the Toronto Maple Leafs, 5 points back of the Florida Panthers, but 3 points up on the Tampa Bay Lightning. However, please look at point percentage, because that is the amount of points that they have accumulated in relation to the total amount of points that have been on the table. So the Bruins have played 42 games. That's 84 points that have been up for grabs so far this season. They have amassed 45 points for a point percentage of 53.6. So they've grabbed basically just over half of the points available so far this season. You look at the Tampa Bay Lightning, they have 42 points, so 3 fewer than the Bruins, but they've played only 37 games. So that is, 74 available points. And they have 42 of those available points for a point percentage of 568. So while Tampa is behind the Bruins in terms of actual points, they have accumulated a better percentage of points than the Bruins and have 5 games in hand with 3 points back. So at their current point percentage, let's say they pick up at least 5, maybe 6 points in those available games, then they're ahead of the Bruins, certainly in terms of actual points. Now, of course, that's all hypothetical because those games in hand are potential points that Tampa Bay could pick up. You can only make good on that by actually accumulating those points. But the reality is those points are on the table, and Tampa has been a better team than the Bruins, despite the fact that they've lost 4 in a row. They're only 5-5 over their past 10 games. They could already be ahead of the Bruins without that swoon and still have those games in hand. So you see how there's some wiggle room here. But at the end of the day, the Bruins will be in tough to hang on to that third spot in the Atlantic, putting them really in wild card conversation. So when we look at the power rankings, I like to look again at point percentage. I also look at goal differential. Of course, these are very surface numbers. You could dig into the advanced stats, and we'll take a look at Boston's later on in the program. But for right now, let's just look at the teams below 500. These are teams that are in all likelihood outside of the playoff picture. The Buffalo Sabres are the bottom team in the East with a point percentage of .427. They're 15-21-5, minus 14 goal differential. They did win last night against, who was it that they played? A pretty good team, actually, if I recall. They were up against the Washington Capitals, and they pulled off a win in a shootout. But still well at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. They are just ahead of the New York Islanders, a team that the Bruins lost to on Sunday. Again, a missed opportunity for the Bruins there. They were playing the second of a back-to-back, but still on home ice against the team below you in the standings. You need to take care of business there. The Rangers slightly ahead of the Islanders at a point percentage of .474. They are coming off a win, maybe could get back in the swing of things here, but the Rangers have really gone off the rails this season. Now, the Detroit Red Wings are up next. They're 13th in point percentage, .487. They have won 4 in a row after a coaching change. Todd McLellan coming in and reinvigorating that squad, but it may be a bit too little too late. The other team under 500 is the Philadelphia Flyers. They're at .488, and they're 17, 18, and 5. You look at that again. It's kind of deceiving as well with the loser point in the NHL. You get a point for a loss in overtime or the shootout. So the Flyers have won 17 games. You look at 17, 18, and 5. Yeah, not bad. But that's really 17 wins and 23 losses. But you're rewarded for getting a loser point in extra time. So again, that's even a bit more deceiving than it seems. So those are the bottom 5 teams in the NHL at the moment, in the Eastern Conference at the moment anyways. And while the Bruins aren't in that group, they are down there when it comes to goal differential. I say it all the time. Hockey's a very simple game. You need to score more goals than the opposition. And so far, the Bruins have a goal differential of -20. That was at -21 when Jim Montgomery was fired. I think it's gotten as high as -12. But now we're back down to -20 here. Still under interim head coach Joe Sacco. Only the Pittsburgh Penguins, who I didn't mention as a bottom 5 team in the East. Only the Penguins, the Philadelphia Flyers, and have worse goal differentials. The Penguins are -27. The Flyers are -21. The Bruins are level with the New York Islanders when it comes to goal differential at -20. The Bruins also share the distinction of being having the worst goal differential in terms of special teams with the Islanders. The Bruins have let's see here. They have scored let's see here. Where is that? Yeah, they have basically, I believe it was like -17 or something when it comes to power play goals allowed. The Bruins have allowed 31 goals on the power play and have scored 2 shorthanded goals. So their shorthanded goal differential is -29 because they've scored 31, or they've allowed 31 power play goals, but they have scored 2 shorthanded goals. When it comes to the power play, the Bruins have scored 17 power play goals, but they've allowed 5 shorthanded goals for a power play goal differential of 12. Only the Islanders have a worse power play goal differential. They've scored 11 power play goals and have given up 2 shorthanded goals on the power play. I hope that makes sense. Basically, special teams, the Bruins, they're not doing themselves any favors, and they are down there with the Islanders in terms of special teams goal differentials. However, they are still in a playoff spot, and we'll look at the top 11 teams, or the teams above 500 here in the Eastern Conference, as the podcast continues. Have you found yourself paying for subscriptions you didn't want anymore or that you didn't even know that you had? Rocket Money helps you find those subscriptions and makes it easy to not only track them down, but to cancel them as well. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of 500 million in canceled subscriptions. Cancel those unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. They've saved members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. So the Boston Bruins currently sit, in terms of point percentage, in 7th in the Eastern Conference. Teams at 500 are the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Columbus Blue Jackets. They are 4 and 5 points behind the Bruins, respectively. But again, games in hand. Columbus has 2 games in hand, so they could be as close as 1 point behind if they make good on those. The Penguins are, they have 1 game in hand. Now, the really surprising team to keep an eye on right now is the Montreal Canadiens. They're 8-2 over their past 10, and they have risen to 9th in the East in point percentage. They're 4 points back of the Bruins with 2 games in hand. Pretty remarkable stuff from the Montreal Canadiens, who, yeah, they're rebuilding, but have some pieces to compete, especially with Patrick Laine having come back to the lineup or making his debut most recently, and he's been scoring the lights out. Now, the Ottawa Senators have lost 2 in a row. They're still in 8th when it comes to point percentage at .526. They also have a +1 goal differential. But Linus Ullmark, as we learned the other day, currently week to week with an injury. So that will certainly hurt their chances of remaining in the playoff picture if he's out for any length of time. That puts the Bruins at 7th, a .536 point percentage. They're 20, 17, and 5, which really is 20 wins, 22 losses. But with those loser points, they have 45 points here. Regulation wins, they're at 14, which is tied with Montreal, Ottawa, Columbus, and Detroit. And even the Rangers have more regulation wins than the Bruins, despite being well below them in the standings. So the Bruins, again, right there when it comes to playoff contention, but there are some troubling numbers. The number of games played that they have 42, which is second most in the Eastern Conference. A team like Tampa, Ottawa, they are still below 40 games. Tampa's only at 37. Bruins are past the halfway point of their schedule. The Lightning still have 4 games to hit that point in their season. The Senators have 3 games to hit as well. So that's something to keep an eye on. The number of games played and some teams making up that ground sooner than later. And again, you look at Boston's goal differential, it doesn't exactly scream confidence here as we move ahead. What about their underlying stats? The Bruins, you look at shot differential, or shot attempt differential, I should say. The Bruins are ranked 15th in the NHL at the moment. If you look, and this is at 5-on-5 with the majority of the game is played. You look at shot differential, the Bruins are 17th. Scoring chance differential, the Bruins are 11th, so a bit better there. Expected goals, high danger chance differential, the Bruins are 9th, so that's encouraging. expected goals, you look at the expected goal differential for the Bruins, and they are 10th. That's looking at all those factors. So the Bruins, their underlying numbers aren't bad. And their PDO, and that again is adding up shooting percentage, save percentage at 5-on-5. They're an even 100, which is where most teams will land eventually based on negative and positive regression. And that puts the Bruins right at 16th. Where the Bruins can improve and need to improve is on special teams, where their shooting percentage on the power play, right now the Bruins are shooting 8.65 at 5-on-5. On the power play, their shooting percentage is currently 8.17. So below what they're achieving at 5-on-5. The average power play shooting percentage right now in the NHL, we look at the 16th, 15th, 17th teams. Their shooting percentages are 15-something. 15.28, 15.04. Almost double what the Bruins are achieving on the power play. Without an improvement on the power play, even without some more improvement on the penalty kill, this team isn't going to improve their position in the NHL standings. That's just the way it is. They'll get a chance to do that tonight against the Edmonton Oilers. Tomorrow we'll be back on the podcast to recap the storylines, stats, and signals to take away from that game, as well as bring you all the latest on the black and gold. That's what we do here on the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. Be sure to check out Locked On Fantasy Hockey as your next listen. They'll give you everything you need to get a leg up on the competition this week and also help you make the playoffs in your league. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day. Please do take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll talk to you again here tomorrow on Locked On Boston Bruins.